Good evening. Welcome to our Bible study. As usual, I'm going to read some jokes before the study just to wait for people to join on. So far, we've got nobody. So, why did the scientist install a knocker on his door? He wanted to win the Nobel Prize.
There was a thing at the lube shop where I stopped today.
Yeah.
I have a horse named Mayo, and once in a while mayonnaise.
My mom said there's a thing at the lube shop, I think one of those panel signs, saying, I had a horse named Mayo, and sometimes that Mayo neighs. Let's see here. When is a door not a door? When it's ajar. Oh, hi Brenda. I see Brenda there. Yeah, if you're joining in, say hi in the comments so everybody knows you're here. I can't really tell sometimes unless the comment pops up. What did one toilet say to the other? You look a little bit flush. Let's see. Oh, hey Rick and Melinda probably. Have you heard about the corduroy pillows? They're making headlines. It's kind of weird saying jokes and hearing absolutely no laughter. Zero. Because I'm telling my phone, oh, the children are making laughing sounds. It's good. What's the difference between in-laws and outlaws? Outlaws are wanted. Oh, I see Twala and probably Jim. So hey, Twila and Jim. So would a fly without wings be called a walk? Oh, there's Joyce. Hi, Joyce. So what do you call bears with no ears? B. I hear more laughter on the side. Yeah, I wonder how many more. Yeah, it looks like we probably have just about everybody. Doesn't make any sense. Oh, here we go. This will be the last one. Two snowmen are standing in a field. One snowman says to the other, "Funny, I smell carrots too." That's what we'll end with. So my creative juices have kind of run dry tonight. I don't have any sort of clever paper doll to make or, any stuffed animal activities. Oh, I see Ellen Martin's with us. Hi, Ellen. And there's Tina and probably Marty. So hey, Marty and Tina. But I do have a story. Bear with me at beginning because it is a little bit of a sad story to start, but it ends well. And it is a Bible study that we're encouraging comments. So please, if you're listening or watching, put comments in the bottom. And if you want to share this with anybody, feel free to share the video with people so we can get more people listening if you feel they'd like to listen. And like I say, I'll try to pay attention and try to watch the comments that are on my phone popping up here as they come up. But if I miss one, I apologize for that in advance. But hopefully I don't miss any of them. But one account, it's a true story, this did happen, that came to mind when I was getting ready for this lesson and discussing it with Kristen before we started, was a story that I've told before, so it might seem familiar to some of you if you've listened to it in a sermon that I've done in the past. Oh, Carl's from Texas. He's here. So hey, Carl. It's about a cyclist named Mike Hall. So he is one of the, at the time, he was one of the elite ultra-endurance cyclists. One sport that I like to kind of dabble in and do a little bit of is bike pack racing. So it's racing unsupported for long distances. And one race that Mike did was one that was called the Intercontinental Wheel Race. And it was across the southern coast of Australia, basically. And I think it went around 4,000 to 5,000 kilometers. It's a really long race. And Mike Hall has done a lot of these kind of races before. Done races across the U.S., through Europe, across the U.S. both ways, from north to south and also from west to east. So he's done a lot of these races, and he often comes first and often sets the record. He's a really fast, elite racer and really well renowned around the world and in the sport. And while he was racing the Intercontinental Wheel Race, he was racing along, and he was about, I can't remember exactly how much, but 200 to 300 kilometers from the finish. So really, that's a day of riding for him. So he's like a day to the end, pretty much. And he is riding at about 6 in the morning. It was still bright out. But he's riding on a lot of these races just go through kind of lonely highways. This is a road race, so it was raced mostly on asphalt, on pavement. And so he's riding along this kind of lonely country road in Australia, and he got rear-ended by a car. A car came over a hill. The speed limit was, I think, around 100 kilometers an hour in that area, and got rear-ended, and he died. He got killed, from this, just an accident. Somebody was driving along, and I guess he wasn't paying attention initially. Oh, I got the name wrong. Indian Pacific Wheel Race, not Intercontinental. I think I got that mixed up. He organized a race across Europe called the Transcontinental, so that's where I had Continental in my mind. But the Indian Pacific Wheel Race. Thank you, Kristen. So he passed away from his injuries. He was rear-ended at high speeds and didn't survive. So there was investigations and a lot of talk. And if you follow social media, and you probably understand we're on social media now, so you're probably somewhat familiar with it, you can understand that there's lots of talk about what happened. Mike Hall was really highly thought of. He's a very good ambassador for the sport, really nice guy, always tried to help whenever he could. And so there's a lot of talk and talk in general about cars and cyclists. The people who drive cars, cyclists shouldn't be on the road. And the cyclists are saying the cars have to be careful and watch out because we are on the road too and we're going to be there. So a lot of debate, a lot of really harsh debate, a lot of hard feelings, from this happening. And so it was quite a long time after, I think a year, where they had the inquest in Australia, in Canberra. And this was a investigation. So the authorities, local authorities, were investigating what happened. And one thing that was really amazing that happened, Mike Hall's mother, Patricia, she went down to the inquest and watched all 3 days of the inquest. And she reacted in a, at least I thought, an unexpected way. You might think there would be a lot of anger and a lot of, shouting, a lot of hard feelings. But at the end of the inquest, she went up and hugged this guy. He was a young guy. His girlfriend was there. They had a child together. And she hugged the guy and hugged the girlfriend and said she forgive them. She said, "I forgive you for doing this." She later said that she did that because she wanted them to raise their young family without being burdened by this. She wanted them to just kind of let it go and move on. It happened. There's nothing you can do to change that. Apparently through the inquest, she felt that, she had the heart to forgive him for this. And she just wanted him to be able to move on. She knew that Mike, his attitude was all about empathy and all about trying to help people and trying to be a positive influence on people's life. So she wanted to emulate that too during this inquest with this young family who killed her son. So it's something I can't, I often hear people saying, "Oh, I know how you feel." I can't imagine what that would be like how you would relate to a situation like that. But she related in such a noble way in trying to help these people to move on with their lives. They were a young family, and she just wanted them to move on because that's what she felt that Mike Hall would have wanted. He wasn't a mean-spirited guy who wanted to take revenge, and that wasn't his nature. And she just wanted that to continue on. She didn't want didn't want these people to be burdened with this for the rest of their lives. So it's an amazing example of love. I think it was one example to show that she had that heart of forgiveness and heart of empathy and wanted these other people to move on with their life. And it was an amazing example. And that leads us to the next quality that we were discussing in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. I'm going to read the passage again. So we're in 1 Corinthians 13. If you have your Bibles, please follow along. We're going to start in verse 4. So 1 Corinthians 13, starting in verse 4. It says, "Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails." So this evening, we are going to look at the phrase, the statement, hi Gail, Gail came in, where love is not easily angered. That's in the kind of, the middle end of verse 5. So love is not easily angered. And the question I'd like to start with, so if you're listening, please write your comments in the comment section. The question I have is what are some different ways one can respond to criticism? So if someone tells you to maybe do something better, or maybe they tell you you're doing something wrong, you're not doing it right, and they're criticizing you. Again, that could be a positive criticism, like where somebody is maybe in a mentoring position or a teaching position and they're trying to help you out. But it could just be anything, any situation. What are different ways you can respond to this criticism? Melinda says he obviously learned, so this would be Mike Hall, learned a lot of great qualities from his mom. So she sounds like a beautiful person. And that's very true. That's a good point. Where Mike Hall was emulating the qualities that his mom appears to have. She said she's emulating him, but he probably got that from her. So amazing, woman there probably to have this kind of attitude and attitude to other people and to life. But what are some different ways that one can respond to criticism? So somebody tells you how to do it better, or you're not doing it right. How can you respond to that? What is the best way to respond to that situation? Or what are the different ways? I'm not asking for the best right now, but what are different ways you can respond to that? Some ways I was thinking of is defensive. What do you mean I'm telling you I'm doing it wrong? Some people can even respond that way if you're complimenting them. Like, oh, you look very nice today. Oh, so you're saying I look bad every other day? Is that what you're saying? They could respond in different ways to anything, really. But if somebody's criticizing, I was telling Kristen she had a wrap with, burrito, basically. And I said, it tastes better if you put that cheese under the meat. So you put the cheese, then the meat on top. That's better. That's the way I do it. So, I think it tastes better if you did that. How can you respond to advice like that? How would you be able to respond to that? Some of the negative ways would be that defensive way. You can respond back and kind of, respond back harshly in kind, kind of be angry at the person. Joyce says, roll your eyes and disagree or ignore. That's one thing I had too, was ignore them. Just say, yeah, whatever, that's your opinion, and kind of have that, feeling inside that you didn't like it. You didn't like this, but you just ignore them. Gail says, don't take it negatively, which I think is really smart. That's one way you can respond to the criticism is take it in an open-minded way, is say, okay, somebody has maybe a better way of doing things. That takes a very important quality, which involves love, is that idea of humility. That's something that's taught in the New Testament quite often, is that idea of humility. If somebody criticizes you, says maybe you should be doing something a little bit better, think about it in a little bit open mind. Don't take it negatively. Say, well, yeah, maybe you have a point. You can always take advice, or you can always listen to advice, but you don't always have to take it. But if it is good advice, then maybe you should take it. Maybe you can apply that and be better in the end. Joyce said a good option is to understand that maybe it's a good comment. So maybe there is a way to change. So that goes along with that same idea that, maybe there is a better way to do something and this person is trying to help them out. So having a positive attitude to that response. Rick says, just say thanks and take it as a possible way to improve. So yeah, oh, thank you. And move on from that. Very positive ways to respond to that. Oh, we got Dwight with us. Hey, Dwight. So very good responses on how to respond to criticism. Tina says, first, listen in case it's valid. So listen. That's very important, is to listen. I think that's almost a learned quality, is to make sure that you listen, to focus in on listening to what actually somebody is trying to say. So listen to understand instead of listening to respond. And then you might laugh or say, shut up, or maybe learn from it. So there's different responses based on if that criticism or advice is valid or not. So there's a bunch of different ways you could respond from that. One quality of somebody who might be easily angered. We looked at that phrase. So love is not easily angered. One quality of someone who might be easily angered might be that they see everything that happens to them is a personal slap in the face. It's an affront to them. So anything anybody says to them, one way or the other, is because that person's out to get them. It's a slap in the face. This can occur. It doesn't have to be criticism or advice. It could really just be any event or any sort of situation. So I always like to pick on traffic. I actually don't really drive very often. I ride my bike everywhere. But when I did drive, I kind of relate to this somewhat. You're driving along and a car cuts you off. So maybe the car speeds up and ducks in front of you. They did that on purpose. I knew what they're doing. They were trying to just get ahead of them. And then your response might be, I'm just going to show them, and you speed up and get around and try to cut them off in return. Or maybe you lay on your horn really nice and hard. There's ways that you can respond to this, and somebody who might be easily angered might respond that way. This might be, I'm kind of wondering if this hits home with somebody. Not anybody in particular, but maybe you might say, no one contacted me when I wasn't at church services on Sunday. I didn't, like now I didn't join into the Zoom meeting, or I didn't show up on Facebook. But you couldn't make it that time for whatever reason, but nobody contacted you. So all of a sudden you might, if somebody's easily angered, their response to me, oh, they don't care about me. They don't care that I'm there. They don't love me. I'm never going back. That could be your response. And that would be those responses if you're easily angered. You're overly sensitive or overly, touchy to a certain situation. Maybe, I don't know, maybe you're doing it now. Maybe you're thinking the things that I'm saying, I'm directing it at a person in particular. I'm not. Trust me when I say that. These are just examples. But if you're easily sensitive to these things and easily angered to these things, you might pick up on these things and think that everything that's happening is because of you. But in this verse, in verses 5, where it says, love is not easily angered, I looked at different translations of this verse, and it was pretty interesting to kind of look at it. One thing that's, it almost seems somewhat debatable, is the word easily is easily in there. The New American Standard Version translates that as, it is not provoked. Love is not provoked. It doesn't say it is not easily provoked. The NIV, which is the one that I was reading, is love is not easily angered. That word easily is not in the Greek. It's part of a phrase that can be translated that way. That's some way that they can interpret the Greek word. But the Greek word really means angered, caused anger. I've got it up here. I'm going to look at it just to make sure I don't missay it. It says like to irritate, provoke, to arouse in anger. So love is not provoked. Love is not aroused to anger. It's not provoked in that way. So when you put easily in there, it might be a simple way to temper that a little bit, where if you're not easily angered. So we know that it's okay to get angry. It depends on what you do with that anger and how you respond with that anger. But if you have love for someone, and if you're exhibiting love, you're not going to be easily angered. You're not going to be easily swayed by things that are happening around you to respond in a angry, harsh, negative way. We're to be gentle as Christians. All these other qualities that are listed in 1 Corinthians 13 show how we are to respond to things. And not being easily angered. The idea is that love is good-tempered. You give people that benefit of the doubt. Maybe you're not too sensitive about things. You're not easily offended with things. You don't take things personally as much. Because I know from experience, just from kind of moderating over disputes at work. I was a manager for a while at LensCrafters, so I dealt with a lot of little squabbles between the people working there. Oftentimes, the person that did the offending to the person who was offended, they had absolutely no idea what was going on. They were just going about their business. And they happened to do something that made the other person mad. And that other person took it as if they were doing it to them on purpose, but that person wasn't even in their mind when it happened. It wasn't even, they weren't there. So it's something that is quite interesting. And I think that idea of not being easily angered is one of those things that is actually quite easily to be overlooked as a quality of a Christian. It might be seen as kind of a harmless weakness. You might just be writing it off as, oh, that's just me. I fly off the handle sometimes. Yeah, my buttons are easily pushed. You just kind of write it off that way as a excusable, character flaw, I guess, or, that's just me kind of attitude. But how many troubles in life, I have a feeling that the people listening now can relate to this. How many troubles in life have you experienced that were started by people flying off the handle? Just reacting on impulse and reacting out of anger out of a situation. If you're in a situation where there's a discussion or a disagreement or something, and somebody just flew off the handle, somebody just lost it. How many times did that happen? I was in a work meeting one time, which really blew me away. And there was a bit of a disagreement between a couple of guys in the room, and they started just yelling at each other, just freaking out. And I was blown away. I was like, people still act like this? Like, it really surprised me. But it is something that happens. One aspect that, again, you can answer this in the comments. It's not actually a particular question that I was planning on asking, but you can respond if you like. What if somebody deliberately attacks you? Up to this point, we've been talking about things where maybe they weren't doing that, or maybe it was a critique. Maybe they were doing it in good spirits. What if somebody deliberately attacks you? They are out to get you. They do have you in mind, and they are trying to get at you in some way. How does this passage apply to that? Love is not easily angered. How can you respond if someone deliberately attacks you? It's a tough one because really in our society, and it almost seems like you could agree that it's a positive quality. Melinda says like assault. I don't know if it has to go that far. I'm thinking more verbal than, I guess, well, there can be verbal assault. Yeah, I'm thinking more of a, if somebody is giving you a hard time for something, like, berating you or saying bad things to you, trying to bring your character down. What do you do in that response, in that situation? It's a tough one. It's a tough one to tackle, of how do you deal with somebody who's deliberately trying to go against you. It's a little bit easier to understand if somebody does something that offends you or makes you a little bit angry. You can say, oh, okay, I'm not too worried about it. But if they're actually trying to, get on your bad side, how can you respond that way? It's really difficult to handle it that way. But that'd be one way where you could really show love as a Christian. There's one thing I'd really like to point out is that there is nothing wrong with defending yourself. We can see in the scripture examples of people that are defending themselves. We're always to be ready to give an answer for the hope that we have. We're always should be there to be able to respond. But we are also taught to not respond with to evil with evil. If somebody does something really bad to you, that doesn't give you the excuse to do exactly the same bad thing back to them. Again, if you go back to the traffic thing, somebody cuts you off, that doesn't necessarily give you the right to cut them off too. You still have to respond in the proper way. Nothing wrong with defending yourself, but there's proper ways to defend yourself. Gail says she would just walk away. I think that's really smart. I think that's one of the primary things taught in physical self-defense is the first chance you get, you run away, you get out of there. Get out of there as fast as you can. And the same thing can work. If somebody's really antagonizing you and yelling at you, just leave. Just walk away. You don't have to be there. You don't have to hang around. You don't have to respond in the same way or try to get them to see your point of view. If they're yelling at you, they're obviously emotional, so it would be tough to kind of push back and make them see your point of view, because then it would just turn into an argument. Joyce says that's hard, and I totally agree. In the moment, you could do lots of wrong things, but if you practice being calm, you could respond appropriately. That is true. Trying to respond calmly and appropriately and quietly, that's often the most powerful response. When somebody's really yelling at you and antagonizing you and getting in your face about something, it's more powerful, instead of yelling back at them, to be calm and respond rationally. And if it comes to it, turn around and walk away and come back later. I've instructed the people in my office, because we're in the construction business, so you can sometimes speak to people that are kind of rough around the edges. And if they get worked up and they start screaming and yelling at you and swearing, I told them, just say, I'll call you back later, and you hang them up. Like, it's okay to hang up on these people. If they're yelling at you like that, just try to tell them, call me back when you've calmed down, when you're ready to speak, more civilly, and just hang up on them. That's the best course of action, is just leave the situation. If you go to Ephesians chapter 4, we're going to look at one more passage tonight. This is a passage that deals with how we are to respond to certain situations like this. It's kind of a general passage, but we'll be able to get the idea in our efforts in how we are to respond to either critiques that are unassuming, that are just things that, are not necessarily against you or angry against you, but then also this could be applied to people who are actively antagonizing you. So Ephesians chapter 4, we're going to read the first 6 verses. So Ephesians chapter 4, starting in verse 1. This is Paul writing, and he's writing from prison. So he's writing from jail at this time. So Paul says, as a prisoner for the Lord, then, I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you have received. Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you are called to one hope when you are called. One Lord, one faith, one baptism. One God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. I love this passage to show some of those attitudes that we should have. Like Joyce mentioned, it is hard. This is something that needs to be practiced. It can be practiced on those little situations, So then when you maybe are approached with one of those big situations where it is a yelling match or somebody's really in your face about something, you can hopefully respond appropriately if you practice in the times where it's a little bit easier to keep your calm. Maybe, if your husband tells you to put the cheese under the meat instead of being on top of the meat, you can respond calmly. Oh yes, that's a very good suggestion. And then when you're approached with something that's really harsh, you can respond a little bit calmly because you've had that practice. But one thing we can do and try to understand is that others can and will make mistakes. Other people in that world are going to make mistakes. And if we're to show love, we have to be understanding with the situation. Melinda says there are some good courses out there to help with this. At her work, she's a nurse, we're required to take non-violent crisis intervention. So lots of practical applications that hopefully lead to peace. That's another job. I can't imagine doing her job, being that nurse in that situation where you can be faced with like physical violence and how to deal with that calmly. It's an amazing thing to be able to deal with that. So it, again, takes lots of practice, but there's lots of resources out there to practically deal with it with different precise particular situations. Tina says, I think we must always consider the source. The attacker might be hurting and not coping well. Other times, a low, slow, calming voice might alleviate the tension. But I agree leaving might be a very good choice. Again, that calm response can tend to calm the situation down. Nothing escalates it more than just two people arguing with each other. Because one guy yells loud, the other guy's going to yell louder. It just escalates after that. It turns into this big kind of downward spiral of negativity. But yeah, if you respond in that positive way, a low, slow, calming voice, it might alleviate the tension. But sometimes you do have to just leave. Just get out of that situation altogether. So we talked earlier about being too sensitive to things. If people are saying things to you and giving you this advice, and how you might respond to it, you might be sensitive to that and want to respond in a negative way. So this is a question you can answer in the comments, is what's a solution to being too sensitive to these issues? What's a solution to, if you have an issue with that, of kind of getting super angry, having that harsh feeling where somebody says, oh, you're doing that a little bit wrong. You're not folding those towels right. You got to fold them a different way. Or you're not answering the phone right. Maybe you should do it this way. You can get really mad. You think it's a personal attack. So what's a solution to being too sensitive in those situations? How can we deal with that if you have an issue with that? How can we make sure that we are not easily angered? We're not provoked. If we're showing love and we're showing that attitude of not being provoked, what's a solution to that? One thing I thought of was to always give others the benefit of the doubt. And I think this really goes along with Tina's comment. If somebody's really harsh and negative to you, if you try to understand where they're coming from, that's one thing, one rule kind of about bullies. If you're a bully, I don't know, I was going to say school, but it can apply to any situation. There's lots of bullies in workplaces out there in the world. Oftentimes the bully is that way because they have a low self-esteem because they had a similar abuse heaped upon them at some point in their lives. If they're children, maybe their parents are really harsh, and they're not growing up in a nice loving environment themselves. So their natural response is to behave. This doesn't excuse it, but it does give a little bit of insight to their motives to behaving this way. Their motive is to try to bring other people down to that level and try to make themselves look better by dropping everybody else down. So they tend to bully. They tend to react in this way. But if we can try to give other people that benefit of the doubt and try to think that, okay, maybe they're saying this because they're in a certain situation. I just don't understand it. You don't understand where they're coming from. And that empathy, really that trying to understand what their situation is, can help your response to that situation and not fly off the handle as fast to whatever is happening to you. So you can have that attitude of not being easily angered and not being provoked. Another thing I thought of is that we have to understand that we are not the center of everyone else's universe. The things that are happening around you aren't necessarily, they might be, but in my experience, it's, more often than not, that these things are just happening and you happen to be there and you're taking them personally for really no reason at all. You think you're the center of the universe, but you're not. People aren't doing these things to you. They're just doing them around you. And again, that's my experience when I was that manager in LensCrafters, is these people were just doing things, and that other person just didn't. They thought they were doing it to them, but they weren't. They thought they were the center of the universe. Everybody was doing things to them and because of them and because of that reason for them. Joyce says, you can think about what Jesus had to deal with. So again, look at that example of Jesus. He was treated harshly, regularly, and his response, he responded with nothing but continuing to try to teach in love. So that's very true. He was done nothing but being antagonized. And he responded with love, responded with teaching. And to the point of being antagonized, being crucified, being tortured physically. And he still went through that because he was trying to show and did show that love to the world by giving his life for us. Rick says, try not to put yourself on a pedestal that is above criticism. So being humble. And that's, not center of the universe. So you have to have that attitude of being humble, making sure that you understand that you're not perfect. You're not the center of the universe. People might be just trying to help, and you're just trying. A best attitude is to not be easily angered, to not be provoked, and accept that advice. Again, the rule that I learned from my dad is that you listen to all advice, and you take what you think is going to be helpful for you. You don't have to follow all the advice given to you. This is advice given too when we first had kids. When we got married and we had Mia. Other parents always want to give you the advice. Try to get your kid to sleep all night. You do this, do this, do this. You're going to get tons of advice, and you can listen to all of it, but make sure that you take the advice that's valuable to you. You don't have to listen, or you don't have to take to all that advice. It's good to listen to it, but you don't have to take it all. Joyce says, yes, we're not the center of everyone else's universe. And the truth can hurt. That's a really good point, where your best friends are going to tell you the truth. Your best friends aren't just going to be yes men that say, oh yeah, you're doing everything perfectly. Everything's perfect with you. Your best friends, the people that are really trying to help you, which is hopefully your brothers and sisters in Christ, are the ones that are going to tell you that hard truth, where you should maybe fix this in your life. Maybe this is going to make your life better. Maybe you need to do this to get back on track to be a better disciple of Christ. And those are the people that are the best ones to listen to. And the truth can hurt. It can be tough to take. That's another one I can really relate to. If I get a criticism, often at work, this is where it would happen probably the most. Oh, you could have done this better. And I think my first immediate thought in the back of my head is like, what are you talking about? I did it right the first time. But then I start thinking, well, maybe I could have done it better. And so you try to accept that advice and try to be better, because the truth does kind of sting a little bit sometimes. If you did make a mistake, if you did do something a little not as good as it could have been done, and somebody points that out, it kind of hurts a little bit because it hurts your pride. But humility is very important to have, and it's a very good quality to practice and understand, and always keep in the front of your mind when you are getting this advice, when you are getting these tidbits of information from your friends and family and anybody else. Try to be humble. This is one thing that I believe Gail mentioned earlier, is take a deep breath. Take that second when somebody says something and it hurts. Again, maybe it's the truth, maybe it's not, but they're saying something. They're giving you a criticism. Just stop for a second and take a deep breath. If you have that fast breathing, your body and your brain kind of naturally falls into that kind of fight or flight syndrome where you're agitated. If you take that second to take a nice deep breath and breathe it out, you'll calm your whole system down. You'll be able to respond in a more appropriate way. This is one thing that really helps me, especially if hopefully I'm not a bad driver, but I have made mistakes when I'm driving. I was a bad driver when I was less than 18 years old. I was a bad driver. After that, not so bad. But understand that you'll make mistakes too. And probably, you're going to make mistakes, so when somebody else makes a mistake, hopefully you can be patient with them the same way that you hope that they're patient with you when you make the mistakes. I've cut people off in traffic, and I've done it without realizing it. And so when I see somebody that cuts me off, I might have to slam on my brakes to kind of avoid them. I just think back to the time that I did the same thing. And I think, well, yeah, they probably just weren't paying attention, or they got distracted, or they just didn't happen to see that person, or, something blocked their mirror. And they just made a mistake. So try to be understanding. Try to understand that everybody makes mistakes, and try to have that attitude of love and not be easily provoked, not be easily angered. Try to respond with that quality of love. And if we are showing love to those around us, if we're responding that way, and we practice, we'll be less easily provoked or easily angered. And we'll be understanding when we are criticized or even attacked. We'll be able to respond to that in a loving way. We don't respond to an evil action with an equally evil action in response. Respond to those evil actions with good. Try to respond in an appropriate way. Maybe the best action is to leave for a moment, take a deep breath, take a time to step away, but respond appropriately and don't respond with that negative, easily angered action. Melinda says, if we're easily angered, it's usually because we're not getting our way. That's very true. Or people are not doing things the way we want them to do it. So again, maybe back to the center of the universe. So maybe a little less selfish and realize there are many more ways to get something done. Let me see if I can see the rest of this comment. Many ways to get a task or something done. So there's many different ways to handle things. It doesn't have to be your particular specific way. So if maybe, again, this is if you're collaborating at work or collaborating in a certain situation, oftentimes that takes cooperation and it takes that attitude or a certain level of humility and love by not being easily angered. If you propose an idea and somebody says, well, maybe this idea is a little bit better, you don't automatically think, oh, I got to get my way. I got to force my agenda through. There's many other ways to get things done. And that can happen really in any situation, is having that kind of attitude. And as Christians, if we are showing this agape love and we're responding in this way, when somebody is criticizing us or antagonizing us or something happens that might naturally offend us or provoke us to anger, if we respond in a positive, loving, good way, this is a really good way to stand out in the world. That's one thing mentioned in the New Testament. If we want to stand out as Jesus' disciples, it's going to be because of our love for each other. We're going to show that love to the people around us. And this is a really good way to do it. When others are responding inappropriately, we can respond with love and patience. And that can make a really big impact on the people that you have influence with, if the people that are around you at that time. And if you want to help bring them to Christ, that's something that you can do. You can show that love to them. If you're in that antagonizing, tough situation that naturally you might be easily angered and fly off the handle, if you respond with love and goodness and calmness and gentleness, again in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 2, it says, be completely humble and gentle, be patient, bearing with one another in love. Having that attitude of bearing with one another in love, we can really make an impact to those people that are watching us. We can hopefully reflect that example of Jesus that he gave to us on the world in giving his life to die on the cross for us. We can reflect that to other people around us. We can be those lights to the world and hopefully influence them to something better as well. We all know that there could be a lot of that in the world nowadays. Let's close in prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the many blessings you've given to us and the many things you've provided us with in our scriptures and in ways that we can learn to react appropriately to different situations. We know that right now in the world there's a lot of bad things happening, a lot of things with COVID and a lot of the political issues that are happening right now in the U.S. I pray that we can all deal with these things appropriately, that we can respond in an appropriate way, respond with love in all situations that we have influence over ourselves. And I pray that we can do this with you in mind, that we can always make sure that the sacrifice that you made and that Jesus made on the cross for us, we can always keep that in our minds in all the decisions that we have to make and the actions that we can do to influence other people. Pray that we can do this, that we can stay strong in this, that we can ensure that we don't have that quality of being easily angered, that we can show love and not be easily angered and not be provoked. I pray that you can be with us and give us the strength to do this. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Okay, thank you for listening, everyone. Again, please share if you feel anybody could hear the message from this evening. And be safe, be well, and God bless.